Hi everyone, my name is Reagan Radke. I'm here to talk to you about the country of France and the women in sport that are involved in making this country. So this is the course project for women in sport for the class of fall 2019. So just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about, we're really going to go in depth just about like the population and structure of France, some of the ethnic groups, that are involved in this country, the languages of France, religion, basically just the entire background. And then we're going to work our way into talking about the women in sport and really just how women's rights and women in general have evolved throughout France's history. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the population and structure of France. So as of the 19th century, there were low birth rates in France that led to a predominantly older community. More than a fifth of the population is actually over 60 years old. Women particularly outnumber men in these age groups, but that's mostly because of war and natural life inequalities between men and women. In the 19th century, women increased their work to share the job market with men. This was mostly because of like men going off to war and other reasons too, but that jump really made it in the 20th century. In the mountain regions, there's not a lot of people living, but these are big activity areas like the Alps and all that kind of stuff. But people usually tend to gravitate towards the cities of France, like Paris and other cities as well. But as of 2014, nearly 80% of the population lived in an urban setting around the country. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the ethnic groups of France. So France is a single nation, but it hardly constitutes as a specific ethnic group. So obviously they have like a predominantly French group of people, but they also have um, people from all over too. So before the discovery of America, people thought that France was near the edge of the world, and this made people from the Middle East, Africa, Central Asia, and the Nordic islands to immigrate to France, which formed a variation of grouping people and created a ultimately diverse population. So the population also consists of Basque people, and these are people who live in isolated areas. They also have people from Celtic tribes that make up a big component of France's population. Essentially, France is just a melting pot of Europe with a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different ethnic groups. So in France, French is the national language of the country. It is spoken and taught everywhere. There's also brogues and dialects that are spoken in rural areas. Many people conserve their regional linguistic customs through tradition, and this is most prominent on like frontier areas. As in 1872, though, there was multiple different regional languages that were oppressed when trying to gain country unity, and the children that continued to use these different languages were actually punished. So essentially, they try to make everybody stop speaking different languages to gain a big unity in the country. But nowadays, there's obviously different languages spoken in schools and university, and with recent immigration, there has also been various non-European languages introduced throughout their society. As for religion, around three-fifths of the French population belong to the Roman Catholic Church. A minority of the country participates in religious worship, and it's most commonly practiced within the middle class. France actually has one of Europe's largest Muslim populations, but in the 20th century, the government banned Muslim headscarves and other religious symbols in state schools. Legislation also passed a law in 2010 that prohibited a face concealing garments in public. Other religions that are widely practiced is Judaism and Protestant religions. A large number of people, especially in the working class, profess to have no religious belief. And I actually found it really interesting that marriage is not essentially like a super huge thing in France. They tend to just like go about their lives without having that ceremony. Aside from all the background, France is really big in sports and recreation. Some of the most popular sports include cycling, swimming, soccer, skiing, tennis, bowls, golf, basketball, and martial arts. But that's nearly not as many sports as people in France participate in. The nation's showcase sporting events is the Tour de France, which is an international cycling road race that attracts hundreds of thousands of spectators each year. Actually, the Tour de France covers 2,235 miles over a 3 week duration. Another big sport is soccer. Soccer is huge amongst the French people, and during the winter months, over 5 million people ski in the French Alps. As for the role of women in France, it has changed throughout history. In 1944, women gained the right to vote. The role of women underwent many social and legal changes in the 1960s and the 1970s, which was also during the French Revolution. The traditional role of women in France entails domestic duties like housekeeping, cooking, child rearing, harvesting, and tending to farm animals. But during the Industrial Revolution in France, the role of women changed dramatically, making them into domestic helpers. Women's rights in France has definitely evolved to make what it is today. So it is said that today in France, the government is reinforcing the coherence and effectiveness of gender actions in its development assistance policies and its outreach initiatives. France has the third international strategy for gender equality. This strategy is essentially a steering tool designed to coordinate the work over the next 5 years to improve the situation of women's rights around the world. This is used to concrete international embodiment of the president's commitment to make gender equality in the country of France. The participation in women's sports in France has definitely evolved over time as well. In the year 2015, women accounted for 37.5% of all club sports. And in 2016, 48% of the top athletes in swimming were females, and 38% of the top rugby athletes were females as well. Since 2011, the number of female football club members have increased by over 90%. A few famous female athletes were Laure Monodou, who is in the middle picture, Jeannie Longo, who's in the third picture, and Mary Pierce, who's in the first. Laure Monodou is a French swimmer who is currently retired in her swimming career. She competed in 3 Olympics. Monodou has won 3 gold medals at the European Swimming Championships, and Monodou was also France's first Olympic win in women's swimming. Jeannie Longo was one of the greatest female cyclists of all time. Longo had the longest career in female cycling. She is still competing in 2011 when she originally won her first national title in 1979. She has won all titles in the sport and has been a world champion 13 times. Mary Pierce is a tennis star that has won 15 tournaments, including 2 Grand Slams, the Australian Open and the French Open. She has a powerful ground stroke that can often overwhelm her toughest opponents. Personally, my favorite French female athlete is Jeannie Longo. I love her grit and go-getter attitude. I admire her love for the sport and how long she has been actively competing. And here are my sources. For any additional information, feel free to look up any of these sites. And thank you for joining me to learn all about the background of France and how women have impacted its development over time. French female athletes keep on growing, and I can't wait to see how the games and society are going to grow over time. Thanks again for joining, and for any additional questions, feel free to email me or comment. Thank you.